Hello guys, welcome back to Hold On Survival Stories. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most harrowing and inspiring rescue stories you'll ever hear. This story will show you just how powerful a mother's love can be when everything is on the line, how quick thinking can mean the difference between life and death, and how complete strangers can become heroes when others need them most. You'll witness how 45 minutes can test every limit of human courage and resilience. This is the story of Sarah Martinez and her 6-year-old daughter Emma, and the day their ordinary Tuesday morning became an extraordinary test that would change their lives forever. By the end of this story, you'll understand why preparation, community, and never giving up hope can be the keys to survival in our darkest moments. The sun was just beginning to cast its warm glow through the windows of the Riverside apartment complex on March 15, 2023. Sarah Martinez, a 32-year-old graphic designer, was going through her usual morning routine in apartment 4B. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the small kitchen as she prepared breakfast for herself and her daughter Emma, a bright and energetic first grader who had inherited her mother's determined spirit and infectious smile. Sarah had been living in the Riverside complex for 3 years, ever since her divorce. The building, constructed in 1987, wasn't the newest or most luxurious, but it was affordable, safe, and had become home. The neighbors were friendly, the school district was good, and Emma had made friends with several children in the building. Mrs. Chen from 4A often watched Emma when Sarah worked late, and the Williams family in 4C had become like extended family, sharing dinners and holidays. That morning, like every Tuesday, Sarah was preparing to drop Emma off at Riverside Elementary before heading to her job at a local marketing firm. Emma was particularly excited because it was show and tell day, and she had carefully prepared a presentation about her pet hamster, Mr. Whiskers. Sarah watched her daughter practice her speech one more time, gesturing enthusiastically with her small hands, her dark curls bouncing as she spoke. And Mr. Whiskers loves to run on his wheel at night, which sometimes keeps Mommy awake, Emma giggled, looking at Sarah with those bright brown eyes that melted her heart every single day. Sarah couldn't help but smile back, feeling that familiar surge of overwhelming love and protectiveness that came with being a single mother. Everything she did, every decision she made, was for this little girl, who had become her entire world. As they finished breakfast, Sarah noticed Emma was wearing her favorite dress, a bright yellow sundress with tiny sunflowers that Sarah's mother had sent for Emma's birthday. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, braiding Emma's hair into 2 neat plaits. Emma beamed with pride, spinning around to make the dress twirl. These were the moments Sarah treasured most, the quiet, ordinary moments that made up the fabric of their life together. The morning seemed perfect, peaceful, and utterly normal. Neither Sarah nor Emma could have imagined that in less than an hour, their lives would be hanging in the balance, and that this ordinary Tuesday would become a day that would test every ounce of strength, courage, and love that Sarah possessed. At 8:47 a.m., as Sarah was gathering Emma's backpack and lunchbox, she noticed a faint smell in the hallway. It was acrid, unfamiliar, not like the usual cooking smells or cleaning products she was accustomed to. She paused at their apartment door, her hand on the doorknob, and took a deeper breath. The smell was definitely smoke, but it seemed distant, perhaps coming from another floor. "Mummy, what's that smell?" Emma asked, wrinkling her nose as she came up behind Sarah with her show and tell poster about Mr. Whiskers.
I'm not sure, honey. Let me check, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice calm, even as a small knot of worry began forming in her stomach. She had always been cautious, some might say overcautious, about safety. As a single mother, she felt the weight of responsibility for Emma's well-being every moment of every day. Sarah opened the apartment door and stepped into the hallway. The smoke smell was definitely stronger here, and she could see a thin haze beginning to form near the ceiling. The building's old ventilation system had always been problematic, but this was different. This was smoke, and it was getting thicker by the minute. She quickly knocked on Mrs. Chen's door across the hall. "Mrs. Chen, do you smell smoke?" she called out. There was no answer. She tried the Williams apartment next door, 4C. Again, no response. It was Tuesday morning. Most of her neighbors were likely already at work or taking their children to school. The smoke was becoming more noticeable now, and she could hear something that made her blood run cold. The distant sound of crackling. Fire. Somewhere in the building, there was an actual fire, and it was spreading. Sarah rushed back into her apartment, her heart beginning to race. "Mommy, we need to leave right now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady but urgent. Emma looked up from petting Mr. Whiskers, immediately sensing the change in her mother's tone. "But what about Mr. Whiskers?" Emma asked, her eyes beginning to show the first signs of fear. "We'll come back for him, sweetheart. Right now, we need to go," Sarah said, grabbing Emma's hand and their jackets. But as she opened the apartment door again, she was met with a wall of thick black smoke that made her immediately slam the door shut and start coughing. In the span of just a few minutes, their escape route had been completely cut off. The hallway, which had been their path to safety just moments before, was now filled with toxic smoke. Sarah's mind raced as she realized the terrifying truth. They were trapped. She ran to the window and looked down on the parking lot 4 stories below. Fire trucks were just beginning to arrive, their sirens wailing and red lights flashing. Neighbors were gathering in the parking lot, many still in their pajamas or work clothes, pointing up at the building and talking frantically on their phones. Sarah could see flames beginning to lick at the windows of apartments on the 2nd floor. The fire was spreading upward, following the building's old ventilation system and dry wooden framework. The Riverside complex, built decades before modern fire safety standards, was becoming a death trap. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emma whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit, a worn pink bunny that had been her comfort object since she was a toddler. Sarah knelt down and took Emma's face in her hands, looking directly into those frightened brown eyes. "I know you're scared, baby. Mommy's scared too, but we're going to be okay. I promise you, we're going to be okay." As she said those words, Sarah prayed to God that she would be able to keep that promise, because looking at the smoke now seeping under their apartment door, she honestly wasn't sure how. At 8:52 a.m., exactly 5 minutes after Sarah first noticed the smoke, their apartment was beginning to fill with the acrid haze. Sarah's training as a former Girl Scout leader kicked in, and she immediately began implementing the fire safety procedures she had taught to children, but never imagined she would need to use to save her own daughter's life. "Emma, we need to go to the bathroom right now," Sarah said, scooping up her daughter and carrying her quickly down the short hallway of their apartment. The bathroom was the smallest room, farthest from the main hallway, and had a window that might provide some ventilation. Sarah immediately turned on the cold water in the bathtub and began soaking every towel she could find. "Emma, I need you to help Mommy. Can you get me that washcloth from the cabinet?" she asked, trying to give Emma a task to keep her focused and prevent panic from setting in. Emma nodded seriously, her 6-year-old mind understanding that this was important, even if she didn't fully grasp the danger they were in. She handed Sarah the washcloth, and Sarah soaked it in cold water before gently placing it over Emma's nose and mouth. "This is going to help us breathe better," Sarah explained, preparing another wet cloth for herself. "Remember when we talked about fire safety at school? We need to stay low where the air is cleaner." Sarah's phone showed 8:54 a.m. when she made the call that would begin their rescue. Her hands were shaking as she dialed 911, but her voice was surprisingly steady when the operator answered. "911, what's your emergency?" "This is Sarah Martinez. I'm trapped with my 6-year-old daughter in apartment 4B at the Riverside apartment complex on Oak Street. The building is on fire and we can't get out. The hallway is full of smoke." "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Fire department is already en route to your location. Are you and your daughter injured?" "No, we're not injured, but the smoke is getting worse. We're in the bathroom with wet towels." "That's good, ma'am. That's exactly what you should be doing. Can you get to a window?" Sarah looked at the small bathroom window, which faced the back of the building. "Yes, there's a window, but we're on the 4th floor." "Don't attempt to jump or climb out. Stay on the line with me. Help is coming." As Sarah talked to the 911 operator, she could hear Emma beginning to cough. The smoke was seeping under the bathroom door now, and despite their wet towels, it was becoming harder to breathe. Sarah made a quick decision and broke the bathroom window with the handle of her hairbrush, careful to shield Emma from the glass. Fresh air rushed in, and both Sarah and Emma took deep, grateful breaths. The cool morning air was a stark contrast to the increasingly hot and smoky apartment. "Mommy, why is our home trying to hurt us?" Emma asked, her voice muffled by the wet washcloth. Sarah's heart broke at the innocent question. "It's not trying to hurt us, sweetheart. Sometimes bad things happen. But remember what Mommy always tells you? That you'll always protect me?" Emma replied, her brown eyes looking up at Sarah with complete trust. "That's right, and I will, no matter what." At 9:02 a.m., 10 minutes into their ordeal, Sarah could hear the sound of fire trucks and emergency vehicles arriving in the parking lot below. She looked out the broken bathroom window and saw a crowd of neighbors, firefighters in their heavy gear, and ambulances lined up in the parking lot. "Help! We're up here!" Sarah shouted out the window, waving frantically. "4th floor, apartment 4B." Several firefighters looked up and pointed to their window. She could see them talking into their radios and gesturing toward the building. One firefighter held up a bullhorn. "Ma'am, we see you. Stay where you are. Do not attempt to leave the room. We're coming to get you." Sarah relayed this information to the 911 operator, who confirmed that the incident commander was now aware of their exact location. But as Sarah looked down at the fire truck extending its ladder, she realized with growing horror that the ladder wouldn't reach them. The Riverside complex was too tall, and the fire truck's ladder extended only to the 3rd floor. Emma had noticed too. "Mommy, why isn't the ladder coming up to us?" Sarah didn't have an answer. At 9:05 a.m.,
15 minutes into what would become a 45-minute nightmare, Sarah realized that their rescue was going to be far more complicated than she had hoped. The heat in the apartment was becoming unbearable. Even in the bathroom, with the window open, the temperature was rising rapidly. Sarah could hear the fire crackling somewhere in the building, getting closer. The wet towels were helping with the smoke, but she knew they would need to be re-soaked soon. "Emma, I need you to be Mommy's brave helper. Can you sit right here by the window where the freshest air is while I get more water on these towels?" Emma nodded, clutching Rosie the rabbit tighter. "Mommy, will Daddy come help us?" Sarah's ex-husband lived 3 states away and had minimal contact with Emma. But Sarah understood that in moments of fear, children reach for any source of potential help. "Right now, it's just you and me, sweetheart. But look at all those people down there working to help us. We're not alone." As Sarah re-soaked the towels in the bathtub, she allowed herself one moment of pure terror. What if they couldn't get to them? What if the fire reached their apartment before rescue arrived? What if she couldn't keep her promise to protect Emma? But looking at her daughter, sitting bravely by the window, still wearing that bright yellow sundress with sunflowers, Sarah pushed those thoughts away. She would not let fear paralyze her. She would not let her daughter see her give up hope. At 9:08 a.m., as the fire department worked frantically to devise a rescue plan, something beautiful began happening in the parking lot below. The community of Riverside Apartments, and even strangers who had heard about the emergency on social media and radio reports, began arriving to help in any way they could. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2A had organized several neighbors to bring every blanket, comforter, and tarp they could find. They were spreading them out in a large circle directly below Sarah and Emma's window, creating a makeshift safety net. The firefighters initially tried to discourage this, but Captain James Morrison, the incident commander, realized that community support might be exactly what was needed to save these lives. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Morrison," came the voice through the bullhorn. "We're working on getting to you. In the meantime, I need you to stay calm and keep that window open for fresh air." Sarah shouted back, "My daughter is only 6. She's getting scared." Captain Morrison, himself a father of 2 young children, felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In his 15 years of firefighting, he had never encountered a situation quite like this. The building's height exceeded their ladder truck's reach, and the narrow alley behind the building made positioning a larger truck impossible. They would need to think creatively. "Sarah," Captain Morrison called up, having gotten her name from the 911 dispatcher, "I'm going to have one of my men talk to your daughter. His name is Firefighter Jake, and he has a little girl just like Emma." Firefighter Jake Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran with a 7-year-old daughter at home, took the bullhorn. "Hi, Emma. I'm Jake. I'm a firefighter, and I'm here to help you and your mommy." Emma appeared at the window, still clutching her pink rabbit. "Hi, Jake," she called down, her small voice barely audible over the noise of the emergency vehicles. "Emma, I want you to know that all of us down here are working really hard to come get you. Can you be brave for me?" "I'm trying to be brave like Mommy." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. His own daughter, Isabella, was home getting ready for school at this very moment. "That's perfect, Emma. You're doing great." Meanwhile, Sarah was facing a terrible reality inside the apartment. The smoke was getting thicker despite their location in the bathroom, and heat was becoming almost unbearable. She could hear the fire getting closer. The crackling was louder now, and she could smell the acrid scent of burning carpet and furniture.
At 9:15 a.m., Sarah made a decision that would later be debated by fire safety experts, but that felt absolutely necessary in the moment. She took off her jacket and began using it to sweep the glass fragments away from the bathroom windowsill. "Emma, Mommy needs you to listen very carefully. If the fire gets too close to us, we might need to go out this window." "But Mommy, it's really far down." "I know, sweetheart, but look at all those people with blankets, and look at all those firefighters. They're not going to let anything happen to us." Emma looked down at the crowd of neighbors and first responders, now numbering nearly 50 people. Mrs. Chen, whom Sarah thought had already left for work, was there holding a corner of a large quilt. The Williams family was there too, along with people Emma didn't recognize, but who had come to help anyway. "Mommy, Mrs. Chen is down there." "I see her, baby. Look how many people care about us." But even as Sarah tried to remain positive for Emma's sake, she was calculating distances and odds in her head. 4 stories, approximately 40 feet. Even with blankets and tarps, a fall from that height could be fatal. But staying in an apartment that was rapidly filling with smoke and heat might be worse. At 9:18 a.m., Captain Morrison's radio crackled with news that would change everything. "Captain, this is Truck 19. We're 3 minutes out with the aerial platform. It'll reach the 4th floor." Sarah couldn't hear the radio communication, but she could see the sudden increase in activity below. More vehicles were arriving, and the firefighters seemed to be moving with renewed purpose. "Sarah," Captain Morrison called through the bullhorn, "hold on. We have a ladder truck coming that can reach you. Just a few more minutes." Sarah felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost made her cry. "Did you hear that, Emma? They have a truck coming that can reach us." But at 9:20 a.m., their situation took a turn for the worse. Sarah could see orange light flickering under the bathroom door. The fire had reached their hallway. The temperature in the bathroom spiked dramatically. Emma began crying from the heat and the increasingly thick smoke. "Mommy, it's too hot. I can't breathe." Sarah soaked the towels again, but the water from the tap was now running hot. She looked out the window desperately. Where was the ladder truck? "Captain Morrison!" she shouted. "The fire is at our door! We're running out of time!" Captain Morrison felt his heart sink. Truck 19 was still 2 minutes away, maybe 3 in the downtown traffic. He made a command decision that would later be studied in fire rescue training programs across the country. "All units, we're going to attempt a rope rescue from the roof. I need volunteers." Firefighter Jake Rodriguez immediately stepped forward. "I'll go, Captain." "Jake, you know this is extremely dangerous. We're talking about rappelleering down the side of a burning building." "Captain, I have a daughter Emma's age. I'm going." At 9:23 a.m., as Jake and 2 other firefighters began their ascent to the roof of the burning building, Sarah made the most difficult decision of her life. She looked at Emma, who was coughing now, despite the wet towel, and realized they might not have enough time to wait for the rescue. "Emma, I need you to listen to Mommy. We might have to be very brave and jump to those blankets." Emma's eyes went wide with terror. "I don't want to jump, Mommy." "I know, sweetheart, but if we have to, we'll jump together. And I promise you I will never let anything happen to you." As if responding to her words, the bathroom door suddenly became too hot to touch. She could see smoke seeping around its edges in thick, black streams. They were out of time. At 9:25 a.m., exactly 25 minutes into their ordeal, Sarah picked up her daughter and stood at the window. 4 stories below, dozens of people held blankets and tarps, all looking at them with expressions of hope and terror. "Mommy, I'm scared," whispered Emma. "I know, baby, but remember what I told you? I will always protect you, no matter what." Sarah was preparing to make the most terrifying leap of faith any parent could imagine when she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Jake Rodriguez's voice, not from the bullhorn below, but from directly above them. "Sarah, look up! I'm coming down!"
At 9:26 a.m., firefighter Jake Rodriguez began his descent from the roof of the burning building, equipped with climbing gear and a harness system that would allow him to carry one person at a time to safety. The technical rescue operation was complicated by the fire's proximity and the building's old construction, but Jake had trained for scenarios like this his entire career. "Sarah, I'm going to lower a harness to you," Jake called down from his position above their window. "We're going to get Emma out first." Sarah looked up to see Jake's face appearing above their window, framed by smoke and the morning sky. He looked impossibly young and impossibly brave, suspended by ropes against the side of a burning building. "Jake, the fire is right outside our door," Sarah shouted up to him. "I know, Sarah. That's why we need to move fast. Is Emma ready?" Sarah looked at her daughter, who was staring up at Jake with a mixture of fear and amazement. "Emma, this is the firefighter who was talking to you. He's going to take you down to all those people with blankets, and then he's coming back for Mommy." "But I don't want to leave you, Mommy," Emma said, clinging to Sarah's shirt. Sarah knelt down so she was at eye level with Emma. This was the moment she had been dreading, having to send her 6-year-old daughter down the side of a burning building with a stranger, trusting that they would both survive this ordeal. "Emma, remember when you learned to ride your bike and you were scared to let go of the fence?" Emma nodded. "And remember how I told you that sometimes we have to be brave and trust that good things will happen?" Emma nodded again, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is one of those times, sweetheart. Jake is going to take you to safety, and then he's coming back for Mommy. And then we'll be together again, and we'll go home and hug Mr. Whiskers." At 9:28 a.m., Jake lowered the smaller harness through the window. It was designed for children and would fit Emma perfectly. Sarah helped her daughter step into the harness, adjusting the straps with shaking hands. "Emma, I need you to look at me," Sarah said, taking her daughter's face in her hands. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky, and I will see you in just a few minutes." "I love you too, Mommy, more than all the hearts in the world," Emma replied, using their special phrase that they had shared since Emma was a toddler. Jake's voice came from above, calm and reassuring. "Emma, I'm going to pull you up to me now. Keep your eyes on your Mommy until you can't see her anymore, and then look at me, okay?" Emma nodded bravely, and Sarah watched as her daughter was slowly lifted out of the bathroom window. The image of Emma in her bright yellow sundress with sunflowers suspended against the gray, smoke-filled sky would haunt Sarah's dreams for months to come. "She's secure, Sarah. We're going to the ground now. I'll be back for you in 5 minutes." 5 minutes. Sarah wasn't sure she had 5 minutes. The bathroom door was now visibly hot, and she could see actual flames flickering underneath it. The apartment was becoming an oven, and the smoke was so thick that even at the window, breathing was difficult. Sarah watched through the window as Jake and Emma descended the side of the building. She could see Emma looking up at her until the very last moment before Jake touched down in the parking lot and was immediately surrounded by paramedics and firefighters. At 9:32 a.m., as Jake began his ascent back up the building to rescue Sarah, the bathroom door finally gave way. Sarah turned around to see flames rushing into the small room like a living thing, hungry and destructive. Sarah had nowhere to go except out the window. The room was filling with fire, and she could feel her hair and clothes beginning to singe from the heat. She climbed onto the windowsill, 4 stories above the parking lot, and waited for Jake.
Sarah, hang on! Jake's voice was closer now. I'm almost there! But the fire was faster. Her clothes were beginning to smoke, and the heat was so intense that she couldn't breathe. She was going to have to jump, or she was going to die in this bathroom. At 9:34 a.m., Sarah made peace with the possibility that she might not survive. She thought about Emma, safely on the ground now, hopefully being comforted by paramedics and neighbors. She thought about all the things she wished she had told her daughter, all the moments they wouldn't get to share if this ended badly. She was preparing to jump when Jake's hand grabbed her arm. "I've got you, Sarah. You're okay. I've got you." Sarah looked up to see Jake's face, covered in soot and sweat, his eyes filled with determination. He was clipping the harness around her waist as flames licked at their feet. "Sarah, I can't leave without saying goodbye to Emma properly," Sarah said, panic overtaking her rationality. "Sarah, you're going to see Emma in 30 seconds. She's waiting for you, but right now we need to go." At 9:35 a.m., exactly 45 minutes after Sarah first smelled smoke in her hallway, Jake and Sarah began their descent down the side of the burning building. Sarah had never been more terrified in her life, suspended in midair over a 4-story drop, but she had also never felt more grateful. As they descended, Sarah could see Emma in the parking lot below, wrapped in a blanket and surrounded by paramedics, looking up at them with those bright brown eyes. Mrs. Chen was holding Emma's hand, and the Williams family was there too, along with dozens of neighbors who had stayed to see the rescue through to the end. At 9:37 a.m., Sarah's feet touched the ground. The first thing she did was run to Emma and sweep her into the tightest hug of both their lives. "Mommy, you came back!" Emma sobbed into Sarah's shoulder. "I promised you I would always protect you," Sarah whispered back. "I promised." Captain Morrison later said that in 15 years of firefighting, he had never seen a community response like the one at Riverside Apartments that day. The fire had been contained to 3 apartments, and while the building would need extensive repairs, no lives were lost. Jake Rodriguez was later commended for his bravery, but he always insisted that the real hero was Sarah Martinez, who kept her daughter calm and hopeful during 45 minutes that could have ended in tragedy.
As the paramedics checked Sarah and Emma for smoke inhalation and other injuries, the full scope of what had just happened began to sink in. They were alive. They were together. They had survived. The Red Cross arrived to help families displaced by the fire find temporary housing. Sarah and Emma would be staying with Mrs. Chen for a few days while they figured out their next steps. Most of their belongings had been destroyed, but as Sarah held Emma close, watching the firefighters finish extinguishing the last of the flames, she realized that everything that truly mattered was right there in her arms. "Mommy, what about Mr. Whiskers?" Emma asked, suddenly remembering her beloved pet hamster. Sarah's heart sunk. In all the chaos, she had forgotten about Mr. Whiskers. She was trying to figure out how to tell Emma that their pet probably hadn't survived when firefighter Jake approached them. "Emma, I have something for you," Jake said, and from behind his back, he produced a small pet carrier. Inside was Mr. Whiskers, very much alive and apparently unharmed. "Mr. Whiskers!" Emma squealed with delight. "You saved him too?" Jake smiled. "When we went back in to check the apartment, he was in his cage by the window. The little guy was smart. He stayed where the air was freshest." Emma hugged the pet carrier close to her chest, and Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. After 45 minutes of terror, this small miracle felt almost too good to be true. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, the emergency room physician who examined them at Riverside General Hospital, was amazed by their condition. "Mrs. Martinez, Considering what you both went through, you are in remarkably good shape. Emma has very minor smoke inhalation, and you have some singed hair and a few minor burns, but you're both going to be fine." "How is that possible?" Sarah asked. "We were in that apartment for 45 minutes. "Your quick thinking probably saved both your lives," Dr. Hoffman explained. "Moving to the bathroom, using wet towels, breaking the window for fresh air, those were all textbook responses. You kept your daughter alive through one of the most dangerous situations a person can face." Later that evening, as Sarah and Emma settled into Miss Chen's guest room, Emma asked the question that had been on Sarah's mind all day. "Mommy, why did this happen to us?" Sarah thought carefully about her answer. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes bad things happen for no reason at all? How do you help them make sense of a world where their safe, warm home can become a death trap in a matter of minutes? "Sometimes bad things happen, sweetheart. But do you know what I learned today?" "What, Mommy?" "I learned that even when scary things happen, there are always good people who will help us, like Jake, who climbed down a building to save us, like all our neighbors who brought blankets and stayed to make sure we were okay, like Mrs. Chen, who's letting us stay here until we find a new home." She considered this seriously. "And I learned that you really will always protect me, just like you promised." Sarah kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo mixed with the lingering smell of smoke. "Always, baby, no matter what." 3 months later, Sarah and Emma moved into a new apartment across town, this one in a modern building with updated fire safety systems. Emma had returned to school and had become something of a celebrity among her classmates for surviving a fire. She had given dozens of presentations about fire safety, always emphasizing the importance of having a family evacuation plan. Jake Rodriguez became a regular visitor, bringing his own daughter, Isabella, to play with Emma. The two girls became fast friends, bonded by their father's shared commitment to helping others. Sarah often thought about those 45 minutes and how they had changed her perspective on everything. She had learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined, that her daughter was braver than she had known, and that, in moments of crisis, strangers would risk their own lives to save people they had never met. The Riverside apartment fire made local and national news, becoming a case study in community response and innovative rescue techniques. But for Sarah Martinez, it would always be remembered as the day she learned that love truly can overcome fear, that promises to our children are sacred, and that 45 minutes can feel like a lifetime when every second matters. "Mommy, if something scary happens again, will you promise to protect me?" Sarah looked into those bright brown eyes that had looked up to her with such trust during the most terrifying moments of both their lives. "I promise, sweetheart. I will always protect you, no matter what." And this time, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that it was a promise she could keep. This story, like all the stories we share on Hold On, Survival Stories, reminds us of the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Sarah Martinez and 6-year-old Emma faced a situation that would terrify anyone, but they faced it together with courage, love, and an unshakable belief that they would survive. The heroes of this story aren't just the firefighters who risked their lives to perform a daring rescue. They're also the neighbors who brought blankets and refused to leave until they knew Sarah and Emma were safe. They're the 911 operators who stayed on the line, providing guidance and comfort. They're the paramedics who treated not just injuries, but trauma and fear. But most of all, the hero of this story is a mother who, when faced with the unthinkable, found strength she didn't know she possessed and kept her promise to protect her child no matter what. In our next episode of Hold On, Survival Stories, we'll be sharing another incredible tale of human endurance and the power of hope in the darkest moments. Until then, remember that no matter what challenges you're facing, no matter how impossible things might seem, there are always people willing to help, and there's always a reason to hold on. But before we go, I want to ask you guys some questions. Have you ever had to face an emergency situation where you had to stay calm and think quickly? What would you have done if you were in Sarah's position? Would you have been able to keep your child calm while making those life or death decisions? And here's a big one. Do you have an emergency plan with your family? After hearing this story, what steps are you going to take to make sure you're prepared if something like this ever happens to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own emergency stories if you feel comfortable. Your experience might help someone else who's going through a tough time. And if this story moved you or taught you something new, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps us bring you more incredible survival stories every week. Thank you for listening to Hold On, Survival Stories. Stay safe, and remember, you're stronger than you know.